Hi, good morning, everybody. I'm Ilaneet, Goran. I'm an equity educator, a social worker by trade. Nice to see familiar faces. Hi, those who I know. I work at Harmony Movement as a manager of community development and training. And so today I'm going to facilitate a bit of a conversation, actually, a bit of a process of reflection, something that we can continue to think about as the day progresses. So, at Harmony, before I talk about who we are and what we do, we always try to start with a circle. We work with small groups, medium-sized groups, and large groups just like this and even bigger. And whenever possible, we try to get people in a circle or imagine that we're in a circle. And part of the reason for that is that a circle is the perfect metaphor for inclusion and equality. There's no beginning and no end in a circle. No hierarchy. And so I want you to imagine that we are in a large circle, and I think we can because we're kind of, we're all grouped together. There's no beginning, no end in this room. And I want you to envision that we are a circle and feel yourself included and part of that circle. And I want you to think about people who are not here, but are here in spirit and are part of this land. And so this brings me to acknowledge the land that we're on. And this is another way we always start our sessions. And I'm going to read an acknowledgement that relates to this particular territory that we're on. So I would like to acknowledge that this land on which we gather this morning is the traditional territory of the Haudenosaunee, the Métis, and most recently, the territory of the Mississaugas of the Credit River. The territory was the subject of the Dish with One Spoon, Wampum Belt Covenant, which is an agreement between the Iroquois Confederacy and the Ojibwe and allied nations to peaceably share and care for the resources around the Great Lake. So I just want to express my gratitude to the land and to you for having me here today. So, Harmony, who are we? We're not eHarmony, not to be confused with that if you look us up, although we do like to bring people together. We are in Ontario's leading provider of equity and education training and leadership development programs for youth and adults in schools and in the community. We work with school boards for the past 20 years. We've worked closely with schools across Ontario. And we are in over 50 English-speaking schools across Ontario out of 60 plus. So we're really proud of that relationship. And for the past 10 years, we've been doing more and more work in the community, so supporting organizations, social service agencies, helping them develop skills, capacity around equity, diversity, and inclusion. And I worked at Community Living Toronto for a few years as their diversity specialist, leading projects and research and education around equity and diversity. So I'd like to contextualize kind of our conversation today and talk about why we're here and how does this relate to the rest of our day. And for me as a social worker, it's simple. It's about people, right? And as people working with people in a diverse society, we have a responsibility to develop a particular awareness, a particular analysis, a lens. We call it an equity lens, which is part of the title of the presentation. A particular way of looking at the world to make sure that every single person, without exception, feels welcomed, included, validated, affirmed, reflected, seen, heard, feels belong, right? And so how we do that is through a process of reflection, which we're going to do. But anybody here is familiar with the movie The Matrix? Raise your hand or make a sound if you are, if you have seen. Don't be ashamed to admit that you've seen The Matrix multiple times, okay? All right. So in the movie, if you remember that part in the first movie out of the trilogy, you're given the choice, right? There's a blue pill, and if you choose to take the blue pill, you go to sleep, you wake up in the morning, you continue to go about your business, you continue to see the world in the same way that you always have. But what happens if you take the red pill? Anybody?
What it is. You see it for what it is.
you see it for what it is. So you gain a new state of awareness, if you will, a new way of looking at the world. All of a sudden, you see things differently. And the thing is, you can't unknow what you now know, right? That's the thing. So I like to talk about an equity lens. It's kind of the same thing. It's kind of in the same way that once we begin to understand and see some of the barriers and some of the systemic issues, it's very difficult to continue to ignore them, right? And so what I want you to do is, I want you to hold these ideas in your mind as you go through your day. So when you talk about your services, when you talk about the case study, okay, I want you to try to apply the equity lens to that study as well, okay? So I often hear people tell me, but Ilaneet, it's just about awareness, right? It's just about being aware. And I say, yes, it's part of it, right? But it's not enough. Awareness is not enough. If awareness were enough, right? If information was enough, then all the isms would have been wasms, right? Then all the forms of discrimination would have been eliminated, right? That's not the case. We know that from the people we support and our lived experiences as well, right? So the work is also about change. It is about change management. It's about managing that change in our organizations, within ourselves as well, but also within the systems in which we work, right? And so, does anyone remember this thing? I used to use it in the 90s, yeah? Yeah, looks familiar? Yeah, don't be shy. Yeah, okay. Well, it's just again a reminder, a visual reminder that we get change when it comes to technology, right? We are adapting all the time at a pace that is just unprecedented, right? And so it's interesting when we talk about equity and human rights, right? There's resistance, right? And that resistance is within our systems, we see it, and also personal resistance, right, within individuals. So just want to reflect about that for a little bit. But there are very good reasons for us as professionals and organizations to talk about human rights and equity and diversity. I'd like to offer 3. Okay? It's simply the right thing to do. It's our ethical responsibility to make sure that people are included with all of their parts of their identities and who they are and how they identify and how they experience the world. But it's also our legal obligation. I continue to be surprised how often organizations leave themselves vulnerable to human rights complaints, right? Because of things that are unaddressed, perhaps unknown. And when you have a human rights complaint, it's already too late in some ways, right? The idea is to be proactive, right? And again, scan your practice, scan your program, scan your organization through an equity lens, right? Even before that, I want to talk about if we want to continue to get paid, we have to make sure our services are relevant to the people in Toronto, right? We've seen the demographic of Toronto shift so much, right, over the past decade and 20 years, right? And so looking at our services and people that we support and the families who are able to access, if we don't see that that demographic matches the demographic of the GTA or Toronto, right, then it tells us something's off there. There are gaps, there are barriers to access perhaps, right? If not everybody is able to access and utilize our services. But businesses simply won't survive. Organizations simply won't survive if we don't adapt, right? So this is all kind of big and abstract perhaps. I want to personalize this a little bit more, okay? And I want to offer an entry point to this conversation, okay? This is a tool that we use, and this is a tool that you can use to reflect on who you are and to reflect on the level of inclusion in your services and programs. And now I want to acknowledge that I know some people in the room are not new to this conversation. I know because I've seen you in my workshops, but also because you've been talking the talk, you've been walking the walk. And so what I want you to do is to look at this through the lens of a champion or a leader or a trainer. See yourself having this conversation with your teams, with your peers, okay? And so look at it as a tool that you might use to facilitate this, okay? So what I want you to do, and you have this visual in your packages as well, is I want you to go through this wheel of diversity, wheel of identity, okay? And I want you to reflect on how each of these dimensions of diversity relate to you. And I'm going to give you some guiding points or guiding things to think about, okay? How we understand the world around us has more to do with who we are, okay? And so, talking about diversity, some people think that, as a diversity trainer, what I'm going to do is come and talk about other cultures or other groups. I come and start talking about ourselves, right? That's the starting point, is looking inwards and asking what our social location is. How do we identify it? How do we experience the world? What barriers we're experiencing, and where do we experience privilege and benefit from power and privilege? So my reality is different than yours based on how I identify and some of the barriers and privileges that I experience, right? And I will share some of that with you, okay? So I want you to take a few minutes to look at this diversity flower and just think about, how do you identify in each and every category or dimension or social area? What terms do you use to describe yourself? Or maybe what community you're a part of, or group that you're part of, okay? So how do you identify in the dimension of ability or disability? Thinking about your physical needs. It could be cognitive, intellectual, however you understand that, however that relates to you, okay? You can also go deeper and ask yourself, where am I experiencing barriers and where am I experiencing privileges, right? So for example, identify as able-bodied woman, okay? So it's something that I have to think about as well in terms of privilege that I experience. One of the things that, how I used to apply the equity lens is to look at this stage, right? And think about, if I had mobility needs, or if I were using a mobility device, I don't think I'd be able to get to this stage, right? And so that helps me think about, people who designed this perhaps didn't conceive, right? That people with mobility challenges or needs might need to get to the podium as speakers, right? That's an application of an equity lens. Thinking about washrooms, right? I can use a female washroom without a problem, but I know a lot of the people that I work with, that I know my friends, oftentimes experience challenges if there's no gender-neutral washroom, right? Just something to think about. So again, going through the flower, ask yourself, how do I identify based on these dimensions? In age, you can think about how old you are, but you can also think about the age group that you feel part of. Some people might use the word youth to self-identify. There might be other terms. In terms of sexual orientation, for example, I'm part of the queer community or the LGBTQ community. So think about your sexual orientation and how you identify, what group you're part of, and where might you experience barriers or privileges based on that. In terms of gender and gender identity, same. Think about, how do you self-identify? Where might you experience barriers and where might you experience privileges? Okay. And so I want to give you a minute to go through the whole wheel as a personal reflection exercise. Okay, and when you're done, I want you to share one thing with your peers around the table that you feel comfortable sharing, that you often share, that might be obvious or people might assume about you. And I want you to share at least one thing that is not so obvious or people don't know right away about you, or they might make assumptions, right? So let's take maybe 2 minutes to do this, okay? And then see how it goes. Okay, so I'm going to bring it back to a large circle. And I'd love to hear maybe 3 sharings, like I'd love to hear people who feel comfortable sharing maybe one thing that, it's easy for them to share. I often find one of the reflections about this field is that there are things for us that are simply easier to share, right? Let's face it, right? I don't know if you noticed that in your conversations, but that was one of the things that I noticed. Other things are a lot harder to talk about, isn't it? Right? I want us to think about why. Why is it, right? Why in some contexts, in our culture, in our spaces, it's easier, for example, to talk about age, or what you do, who we are, our roles. It's harder to talk about race. It's harder to talk about sexual orientation or LGBT identities, right? So I just want us to be aware of that, right? And what that means in terms of the safety of the space, perhaps, or in terms of, again, some of the challenges, right, that we have with these conversations. So I'd love to hear maybe 3 sharings. Yes?
Hi, my name is Dee.
Do you need the mic?
No, I can stand.
Perfect. Okay, thank you.
I'm a third generation Canadian. My family immigrated from Barbados in 1928. And we faced,
Hang on one second. I can bring a mic over.
And we faced racism in the late 50s, early 60s. I'm 59 years old. I'm a consumer survivor with mental illness and addiction. And I'm a Christian, sexual orientation. Yeah. And with all of those challenges, I faced stigmatism, marginalized. I'm a single mom. So that was also when you're in terms of credit or just certain things, but I think that's what makes us effective in our jobs, when we've had that lived experience that we can share not only with our clients, but it empowers us to grow even more and have more inclusion because we've lived it, right?
It's beautiful. Thank you so much. Thank you. Thank you for sharing. That is an excellent demonstration of, sharing and using it also to build rapport and relationships with people. Absolutely. Anyone else wants to share? You can share one thing. You don't have to go through the whole wheel. Just one thing that you'd like to share. Yes, table over there. There's a mic there. Perfect.
We just reflected almost all of our thing you might know was mental health related. So we reflected again how pretty much all of us at some point in our lives are probably touched ourselves or an immediate family member. And I think we're shifting a bit to that being less taboo, but it still is a little bit of that hesitancy, right? Of do we talk about it? Do you say, oh, I'm struggling with my anxiety today or whatever it may be. So that was I'd say our reflection at our table.
Thank you so much. And I love when people make space for mental health. I've seen this wheel, and this is not by any means a final exhaustive list of, identities. You could add many more to this, right? Mental health is something that we added because it wasn't present in many of these diversity wheels, right? I love when people make space for mental health, right? I love, for example, when Jennifer, you said, I need to hold something in my hand. I have some anxiety too. I am a public speaker, and one of the things I dread the most is public speaking, right? And so when people create space for that and they make it okay to be human, right, with all the spectrum of our humanity, don't you just feel like you just go like this, right? And you can be more of yourself. And so that helps me think about how can we do that for people who enter our spaces, our therapeutic spaces, our service spaces, right? How can we do that for people that we support, that we work with, and our colleagues as well, right? So thank you very much for the sharings. I'm going to just move forward to talk about what did you notice when you were talking about identity? So some things that people sometimes say is, again, some things are easier to share than others, right? But what parts perhaps felt uncomfortable? Right? And I want you to think about what that discomfort might be about. Okay? And so this can be a tool, and we spend a lot more time in our workshops at Harmony Movement, talking about identity. and delving deeper and creating more space for conversations and discussions. But today is just kind of a survey, right? A sampling, if you will. But this can be a tool that you can use. Imagine that this is a filter through which you look at your practice, your interactions, case scenarios, case studies, and your program design, our service design, right? And asking, is our services, is our program inclusive of all these different lived experiences? Is that 5 minutes?
Yeah.
Perfect, thank you, I love that. I'm right on track, that's fantastic. Okay, and I want, and if anyone wants to maybe add, like, or just by kind of a nod or not a nod, do you see this tool as something that you can use, right? I've worked with service providers who literally printed this out and posted it in their working spaces as a visual reminder of how we need to look at everything through this lens of diversity, okay? And I put a lens in there. All right, so the last point I want to leave you with is that diversity doesn't mean inclusion. Okay, that's why I talk about awareness isn't enough. We are already diverse. That's our reality. It's like the air that we're breathing, right? We've moved on past talking about diversity. Inclusion is a choice. It's a conscious action, deliberate action that we have to take. Diversity is simply about numbers or optics, but inclusion is about how people feel. Does everyone have an equal chance to achieve their fullest potential? Right? Can everybody succeed? That's the real question. So I love this visual that has been adapted from an original one developed by Craig Froehler, but ConnectABILITY and Jason has designed this with inclusion and equity in mind. So what we've done is we've seen this image circulating on the internet. We loved it, but we said, something is missing. That image just had all same looking people. I don't know if you've seen this image. Have you? Yes, it's very popular. And so we've kind of created more space for people with different mobilities and needs and asked ourselves, okay, how can we use this image to have conversations about this, to help facilitate awareness? So this is available to you through ConnectABILITY. Bridging Diversity on ConnectABILITY is a toolkit with resources and glossary and different tools just like this. But it just helps us to think about equality versus equity, right? Equality is every single person in this room getting shoes. Equity is everybody getting shoes that? Exactly, right? So that's just thinking about that. So I want you to think about your transition process today or conversations, again, through the equity and diversity lens. And here are some guiding questions, and I think it's in your package as well. So if you want to go back to that throughout the day, just check in with yourself. Have I looked at the content today through the diversity and equity lens? Is this program or process or service fully inclusive? For example, are the needs of LGBTQ youth understood and integrated? Are we using the right language? Do we have the right terminology? How are we indicating, how are we signaling inclusiveness for people who are gender diverse, sexually diverse, and have other forms of diversity as well, neurodiverse, etc.? And how culturally competent and anti-oppressive is our practice, right? And again, I recognize that this isn't diversity workshop, right? We're just sampling some of these ideas. There's, we need to do a lot more to actually delve deeper, but just want to leave you with some of these thoughts for today. Okay, so I can be reached in between sessions at this number or email. I'm really happy to hear from you. Any feedback, comments, suggestions, if you want me to do something a little bit different next time or include something next time, I'm happy to do that. And if you're looking for resources, I'm happy to do that as well. So stay in touch and enjoy the rest of your day. Thank you so much.